And then we had our ferry to Faroe Island. And then we wanted to stay 3 days in Faroe Island because I was like, yeah, there are small islands. 3 days is more than enough just to cycle all thing. But there were no tickets for the ferry in 3 days. So we needed to stay a week. And we were like, oh no, because Faroe Islands are extremely expensive. It's such expensive country. Like really, like Iceland is expensive, but Faroe Islands is even more expensive. And now I think that 1 week wasn't enough to see Faroe Island.
Welcome to the Seek Travel Ride podcast, where we share the stories and experiences of people who have undertaken amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on two wheels with our listeners. Hello, I'm your host Bella Malloy, and I'm very excited to introduce my guest for today's episode of Seek Travel Ride, Agnieszka Bagińska. It was in 2013 when Agnieszka first started bike touring. She cycled the Polish coast, starting from the border in Germany and continuing on until she reached the Russian border. That trip sparked off a passion for exploring more of the world on a bicycle. Fast forward to 2021, and despite of the unfavourable circumstances of the global pandemic, Agnieszka loaded up her bike and set off to tour southern Europe. She left from Spain and finished in Greece, traversing 12 countries, covering over 5,300 kilometres in just 100 days. She followed this adventure up with a tour of Northern Europe in 2022, where she set off from Iceland on a trip that would see her not only battle adverse cold weather conditions, but also enjoy the experience of touring with a friend as they headed for Poland. Clearly, the touring bug wore off on some more of Agnieszka's friends, as this year, in 2023, she set off as a group of 3 to cycle Ireland. After that trip, her friends returned to Poland by plane, but Agnieszka decided she wanted to discover more on this journey and instead continued on her way, determined to reach her hometown in Poland with the power of her own legs. I'm really looking forward to speaking with Agnieszka today as she shares the stories and experiences she has built up over all of these trips. And I'm also keen to explore what it's been like for her to not only travel and tour as a solo female, but also share the road in the company of friends as well. Agnieszka, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here.
I am really excited to speak with you, Agnieszka. I think that the tales that you are going to be telling us from these multiple tours you've taken, really over a period of over 10 years now, I'm really excited to get into hearing about your experiences of seeing so many different places, experiencing so many interactions with strangers, learning so much about the world in this form of slow travel on a bicycle. But Agnieszka, a question which I start my show with, and I ask this of all my guests, is, do you remember the very first bike you ever rode?
Oh, I think it was like my dad's old bike, but the thing that I remember about it, like it had very small wheels, and my dad painted it for me because it was like, I think, like a disgusting gray color. It wasn't like a pinkish color, so I remember that was my first bike. And moreover, the day when I learned to cycle, I was 6. I don't know how you call this illness. It's very typical for little children, like your throat goes
like tonsillitis or
yes. So basically when I cycled, my dad like noticed that my neck is like quite swollen, and he said like, yeah, let's go to the doctor. And I remember the day that I learned to cycle, I got this.
Oh no.
Yes.
I want to know then, before, like, do you have memories of what it was like to ride the bike for the first time, or were your memories overtaken from this other event? Because as children, big events are things that trigger memories for us. Like, often we can think of an occasion as a child, and that sparks off some memories that we have. So do you remember the act of riding the bike, or do you remember more that, oh, I think the day I rode the bike, I got really sick?
No, I remember it very well. It's quite interesting. It's not my earliest memory because I was already 6, but it's one of like the memories that I have from like my childhood, and it's very clear. I remember the weather was amazing. It was spring, I believe, because like it was like very sunny and quite warm, and it was on the playground of my old primary school. So yeah, I remember this moment quite vividly.
Oh wow! And then after you recovered from tonsillitis, did you get back on the bike? Did you keep riding constantly, or
Yes, probably yes, because I remember also that with my dad we were going very often, and with my brother we live very close to the forest, like maybe 5 minutes walk. So we were always going to the forest and we were cycling there. So yeah, I remember that we always were quite active. Not like every day, but maybe once a week when, of course, there was a nice weather. Because in Poland maybe you can cycle only mostly during the summer, late spring, and
we're talking with you there at the moment, and winter is knocking on our door. What's the weather like for you there today?
today it's quite grey. Actually, I came back from my last trip a month ago, and I need to admit that I didn't touch my bike since then.
Maybe that this is where I get to do you a favor, Agnieszka, because in the next little point of your day, we get to take your memories back to these beautiful tales and experiences from your tours and transport you back and have you traveling with your mind back to these places instead. So I want to know then, obviously, it sounds like you enjoy the outdoors. You obviously, just from what you were saying there with your father and spending time out towards the forest when the weather were allowed for it. Have the outdoors and exploring and being outside, would you say that that's a passion of yours then? Would you say that you're an outdoors person?
Then no, but now definitely yes. I think actually everything started in 2013 when I really started to cycle more. I cycled before, but it wasn't like in traveling way. And then when I was traveling at that moment, it were mostly like weekend breaks or maybe a week in Spain on the beach, like typical holidays. So this is like part on the bicycle part. And then, for example, funny thing with hiking that because I live in the north of Poland and we have mountains in the south of Poland, so it's like 500, 600 kilometers. But when I was young, it was impossible. It was possible, but it was like 16 hours by train to get to the mountains. So I never hiked. I started to hike when I was 32 and when I traveled for the first time in Southeast Asia. Like before, I never enjoyed mountains or anything. And I think also it was the reason why I struggled a lot when I was getting close to the mountains. I was like, I don't want to cross them, and it was very stressful for me with the bike. It took me time to enjoy it.
Because I can understand that trepidation. There's sometimes where, if I think of the English words for it, you can psych yourself out. You can totally get yourself with these thoughts in your head. And I always think on a bike, the roads often look a lot harder and steeper than what they physically are. And I'm not saying that climbing uphill is not physically hard. Of course, it's hard. You're fighting gravity, and depending on the gradients, it can be really, really, really hard. But I find visually they can look harder than what they are when you're actually on them. Like you can look up, especially on a big mountain climb, and you go, "Oh my goodness, that's going to be so hard." But then you're there, and you're like, "Oh, actually, it's hard, but it's doable." Did you find it took that first time on a bike to be in the mountains, to cycle up them, to realize that you could do it? That then, when you started doing more of them, it became less hard because you had that experience to fall back on.
I remember for the first time when I crossed any mountain was in 2020. So that trip was quite spontaneous. So the idea, because it was like in March, the COVID started. So I set up on a journey in June, late June, and my brother was getting married in September. So I said I will cycle all the way to Poland for his wedding, but I knew it was impossible in 2 months. So I said I will go as far as I can, and from there I would just take a plane and I would just fly to Poland. But I was very scared because it was my first trip and I was going alone. So I said, okay, let's go in parts. So first I decided just to go to Valencia from Malaga. And then in Valencia, I decided to go to Pamplona. So in Pamplona, it was already the moment to cross the Pyrenees.
Into the Basque country. Beautiful.
And I was so stressed and I was struggling. What should I do? If I should cross the mountains. So, like, first, the crossing the mountains, because I was like, oh my God, I will climb the mountain. and then going to a new country, because before I only cycled in Spain. I don't speak French. So for me, it was also, I will go to the country that I don't speak language. And for the first time, I would cross the border of the countries with my bicycle. And for me, it was something like, and I remember like, I was speaking with some of my friends that they were like, oh no, she's not going to cross the mountains. You're not going to do that. And I was like you could be a little bit more supportive.
Thanks, friends.
So I had like a backup plan just to follow Camino de Santiago de Frances, and just to do like a loop in Spain, no? And to stay in a country that I knew very well. And I remember that when I left my friend's house in Pamplona that morning, I still didn't know if I'm going to go up north or west. And I was like, but my motivation was the image of myself in front of the Eiffel Tower. And I said, oh no, it's more important for me to take that picture than any other thing. I was leaving Pamplona, I was cycling and I was crying because I was so stressed. I was so scared. Crossing the mountain and crossing to a new country. What occurred? That it's basically one of the easiest passes in Pyrenees, I think, this part. And it was like going up and up and up. And I was in Roncesvalles and I didn't check the map well. And I just saw like a serpentine. And I was like, oh my God, I have like 17 kilometers to my albergue, no, to
Refuge there, yes.
the refugee. And I thought it's all the way up. So I remember that I had like a decent piece of tortilla de patatas, so like Spanish omelette. Spanish dishes, oh, they're so good.
Right to my heart with food. Fans of the show knows Bella is motivated by food on cycle tours. Keep going, Agnieszka. I'm in.
And I remember that I was like, okay, let's go. I will do it. Like the last 17 kilometers up the hill. And I was like, after 2 kilometers, I was already on the top. So it occurred that the serpentine wasn't up the hill, it was already down the hill. And I was like, that's it. Like,
You've done it.
where are the mountains? Where are the mountains? And the funniest part, when I was later preparing presentation about that trip, I discovered that that day it wasn't the highest peak of that trip. It was a couple of days before when I was going on Via Verde on the greenway, but because the gradient was so soft, I didn't really felt that I got so high. So I was higher than like when I was crossing the Pyrenees. It was just hilarious.
Again, it's that mental win then, isn't it? Because you took something on, it was so big, your friends didn't even think you could do it. You've shown them well and truly since.
I was like, look at me, yeah. I did it.
I need to fast forward past eating the beautiful Spanish tortilla patata to crossing the border. Did you get to the Eiffel Tower? Did you take that picture?
Of course. Yes, yes, yes. And actually it was a beautiful moment because in Paris I finished my trip. So it was like my finish line in front of the Eiffel Tower. And because it was 2020, I had the whole Eiffel Tower for myself. There were only few people from Paris just having a picnic. It was so lovely. And I remember I arrived and I was crying because, after 5 weeks and a half, I got to the place and people were like, "Oh, she's so sweet. Probably she's seeing the Eiffel Tower for the first time." It wasn't my first time, but like the whole trip that I did, and I was just like standing there and crying. I still remember this moment. I was so happy at this moment. It was a beautiful moment, and it will stay forever in my memory. And like I think one of the best moments in my life.
There's a lot of a trip when before you start that's uncertain. And I know it depends a lot on the person as well. There are people who like to plan every single detail of their trip, who research for months and months and months and know where they're going to be from day to day in a rough outline. There's people who plan their trips with spontaneity where I'm leaving from here, I want to get there, I've got this much time to do it, and let's see what adventure awaits us. I think for the latter, there's curiosity obviously to prompt you to take that journey. But there's also a lot of uncertainty in what can lay ahead. And if you've never done something before, that uncertainty can give us thoughts that are maybe a little bit trepidatious, fearful, negative. Did you find that a lot more on that first trip? Or have you found, actually, before we get into that, does this resonate? Is this something that's happened to you before?
I always say that because people very often ask me if I'm not scared when I travel. And I'm still scared because I'm quite spontaneous and it can be very stressful not to know where you're going to sleep, who are you going to meet, especially when you're crossing to a new country, what will be the country, the culture, if you're going to like it. And it's always very stressful. So every day in the morning when I wake up, I feel like this a little bit of stress. But just because I'm living it every day, it became so familiar that it's already motivating and not dismotivating.
Yeah, okay.
So it's like okay for me to feel it because it doesn't stop me anymore. It didn't stop at any moment.
And so you have that self-awareness that you acknowledge that there's that fear, but you also acknowledge that it's normal to be fearful and I can keep doing this because I've done it day after day after day.
Yes, yes.
But would you say then what you have fears about now, do they change or are they around the same thing?
I don't feel that very often, but sometimes when I wake up, I think about it. Especially like if I don't really know where I'm going to get, if I'm going to find some like nice place to stay, or yeah, depends on many. But it's not as often as it was with the first trip. Yeah, because it's been like already 4 big trips that I did, so yeah, it became more.
So that first, and we say first trip, I mean, to be fair to you, you did take a trip in 2013. It may not be as long as your other trips, but that was a trip in itself. To travel in that manner.
So actually, my friend Ada, it was her idea. She was like, "Oh, there will be that long weekend. Do you want to go from like German border all the way to the Russian border?" I was like, "Yeah, why not? I mean, I like cycling, so like, I was okay." So we started three. We finished two because one friend, her bike was just too old. She was struggling a lot. Yeah, actually, the path that we took, it's a part of Eurovelo 10 that goes around Baltic Sea. Now I did it last year as well when I was on the way back from Iceland, and it is quite nicely marked. So it's a quite a good path to. A lot of Polish people start with this trip when they got into cycling.
I might just ask you quickly on your experience then of riding on Eurovelo routes, because I imagine the Eurovelo 10 in this part of the route's not the only Eurovelo that you found yourself cycling on. How have you found just broadly the infrastructure there? And I know that Eurovelo routes are in different states of completion. My experience with Eurovelo routes in France is they can be really varied and really great in infrastructure, and then all of a sudden you just need one or two intersections to not have a sign to cause confusion. I want to know what your experience has been.
Depends on the country. Now, for example, this year I took so many Eurovelos, but like the last part was Eurovelo 9. Austria was amazing. Surprisingly, Czech Republic was amazingly marked. And then, like, at the moment when you cross to Poland, there was like nothing. And I was like, come on. And I was really enjoying it because you don't need to use your GPS, you don't need to use any maps. You just follow the signs, and it was really good. But I know that in Poland there are parts that are very nicely signed. In Spain, it's still again, it's like a little bit like in Poland. It's developing. It's We are not even getting close to French or to Danish people. Like Denmark, it's like when I was in Denmark last year, I was just shocked. It's so nicely signed, like everywhere. I remember that once we were just like enjoying this route. It was so beautiful, and then we needed like to go on the main street, but we were just enjoying it so much that we went other like wrong direction, and then we needed like to make like an extra 30 kilometers just to get to the place that we wanted to. I was only in Denmark, like in Scandinavian countries, but I imagine that like in I think in Norway and Sweden they have the same. They have like those shelters that you can legally wild camp. How brilliant! Not
Yeah.
like in Italy. Everywhere where I wanted to like make a wild camping, there were like huge signs: wild camping forbidden, penalty 500 euros, 1,000 euros, or something. Like. And when I see that, I'm just like, I'm not going to wild camp here because I will be stressed that if someone catches me, like.
Breaking the law or something.
No, but like in Denmark, they're just like, yeah, no, you just go in and to join the nature. Oh, you have water, tap water. You have a nice wooden table and the benches, and just I don't know, I just love it. So
Yeah.
good. It was so good. Another level.
I've heard about this also in Sweden, and I don't know if your travels from Iceland took you
No, no,
through
no.
Sweden, but
Next year.
there's a word in Swedish, and I cannot think of it. I read about it in an article. It might have been in bikepacking.com, one of their magazines, and it was talking about this word for that sort of ensconced itself in Swedish culture, in that they believe that people need access to the outdoors. They should be in the outdoors. That living life, including time in the outdoors, is good for you and nourishing for you. And so then they encourage that, and they have beautiful infrastructure, like you're saying there, beautiful cabins, beautiful places to camp, and they encourage that. Sounds a bit similar to what you experience in other countries up there.
And I believe in Sweden it's legal to camp anywhere.
Yeah, it is. And it's because of this word. It's because of this word. I feel like I'm going to do something I don't normally do. I'm going to quickly Google it because Swedish word for enjoying the outdoors. Let's see. Yeah, so it's friluftsliv, the love of outdoors in Sweden. Okay, if I've left this in the audio edit, it's because I want my listeners to be intrigued enough to Google it themselves and understand
Well,
it.
I didn't know that there is a word for that, so that's
It's a beautiful concept and one that I can certainly fully embrace because wild camping there, Agnieszka, it is something that I could imagine would cause you uncertainty each day, especially if you set out on your trip to perhaps wild camp exclusively or wild camp with the assistance sometimes of utilizing warm showers or, say, couch surfing. Wild camping is something that I know myself provides an extra layer of uncertain stress. It's that unknown, and it's fear of the unknown, and sometimes it's a fear that what if something's going to happen to me because I'm where I shouldn't be, or someone's going to find me here and see that I'm vulnerable. An unfounded fear, I feel, but it's one that can stop a lot of people before they even start. Did you and do you still ever grapple with that side of things?
I said that I hate it. It's not that I hate it. It's something that I'm still struggling with during my trips. So it's something that I'm trying to do. But when I decide, for example, okay, today I will wild camp. So even before, I'm looking on the maps for a good wild camping spot. And it takes me a while. Normally, just in case, I'm checking if there's any camping. So if by the end of the day I change the decision, and it happened quite often that I change the decision, especially alone, because when I'm with someone, it's already perfect. When we were in Ireland this year, in Ireland, I enjoyed Ireland so much. It was amazing. You can wild camp everywhere. People were so nice. People were literally like, "Oh, you can just camp in my garden," and "Oh, you can just camp here, like in a park, just in front of my house, because there's an like elderly lady living, and maybe if she sees you in the morning, she will be just scared." And like nobody had any problem. I remember once we wild camped just like right next to the camping site by the road of the grass there, and we just like pitch our tent there. In the morning, people were going on a walk, and everyone was just like saying hello. Oh, did you sleep well? And we're just like, especially that I know that in the other parts it was more stressful. So then with the girls, like we were wild camping quite a lot in Ireland, almost every second day, because it rained so much that also like we needed campsites just to go and dry our shoes with the hairdryer because it was raining all the time. And then this trip, I think, was the trip that I did the most of the wild campings, but still, there were maybe four in 100 days. It's really, 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 really stressful for me. It's all the time something that I'm fighting with, but my imagination is just so strong that I don't sleep well because I'm so stressed. Because I'm always thinking, like, oh, what was that noise? And it was only a duck because I was like sleeping right next to the pond. The first trip that we did in 2013 with my friends, we were sleeping in the abandoned scouts camp. And I'm pretty sure that there was a wild boar night outside. So that noise was so scary that from that moment, I think I cannot. It's something that I'm thinking about all the time. I think like it's a trauma that I have. And moreover, in the morning, the owners of the camp came and kicked us out. They were really upset that we were camping there. So I think like exactly like both things that people are the most afraid. So like wild animals and that someone will discover you and just like kick you out. Many of my friends, I have some friends that lived also in Melilla. No, they were also like a tourers. And my very very good friend Carl, he always said like it took me like 2 or 3 weeks of like everyday wild camping just to get used to it. You know, and he's a man, so I was like, oh, so okay, so it's like, but I don't know, like I always struggle. I never did like two wild campings in a row alone. It was always like I think I needed to rest mentally from that stress. But the last camping that I did, actually, it was good because I slept for 7 hours, and for me, it was a big achievement. So I was relax enough to sleep for such a long time.
Where were you for that last? Where was that? Was that in Poland
No,
or?
no, in Slovenia. No, oof, in Slovenia, in the north of Slovenia, I hid very well. It was like a picnic place. It was quite comfortable because I had like a picnic. There was a little kitchen with water, with tap water, and there were like benches and tables. So like, and then I just like hid a little bit on the side. But I remember that someone before I fall asleep, someone like drove past there, but they didn't see me, and I was like already like, and so yeah, then I always send to someone just in case my location to some of my friends, just in case, just they know that where I am. It also makes me feel like a little bit more comfortable. So that was the last time when I wild camp, and because it was already getting very cold. Since that moment, I was mostly sleeping on couch surfing and warm showers and hostels because my sleeping bag wasn't warm enough.
Actually, speaking about that, it was something that struck me because your first trip, well, your first big solo trip through Southern Europe, again, Southern Europe, warm temperatures. The next year, and I know you're with friends, Northern Europe, even in summertime, you're not having warm temperatures, let's face it, especially Iceland,
Hmm.
Faroe Islands, bleak. I'm just thinking of the cold that would sink into my bones when the wind cuts right through me in some of those amazing countries. Like visually, the landscapes would just, oh, I think I'd be cycling with my mouth wide open and eyes, wow, just with the raw beauty of it. But there's a reason why it's raw and beautiful, it's wild. How did you cope with those extremes there? Because you're obviously going to be cycling in the elements, regardless of camping or whatnot. Like your sleep system for Southern Europe is going to be vastly different from what you're going to do to sleep in Iceland or the Faroe Islands up in the north.
So there were two reasons why I changed. First reason, and this tour is also like a reason why I started to like do the long distance cycling. He's a Spanish tourer, Daniku, and he was the year before me. He was in Iceland, and when I saw his adventure there, I just said like I want to go there. It was like amazing. I love it. And the second reason actually was related to the temperature because I teach. So I work from September to June. July, August in the south of Spain and France are extremely hot. I was waking up at 5. I couldn't cycle after 10 a.m. because it was just too hot. I couldn't sleep because it was so hot. Very often I just slept without the tent, if it was possible, if there were not too many mosquitoes. And I remember I lived like two heat waves when I was going from Spain to Greece. One was in Spain, and one was in Côte d'Azur in France. The second one, I was lucky enough because my friend, she came back from South America like 3 days before I got to Nice, and she's from Nice. And I just like saw that, and I was like, "Oh my god, I'm here!" And she said, "Oh, if you want, you can just stay at my place." And I stayed there for a week. Imagine that it was so hot that her sister had a beautiful house with the swimming pool outside, and till 7 p.m. we didn't go even to the swimming pool because it was too hot to be outside. We're staying inside in the air conditioning house.
Thank goodness it had air conditioning, I might say.
No, because otherwise it would be impossible. Because in my house in Spain, I didn't have, I had air conditioning, but it was broken. So there were nights that literally I was just like sleeping with my hands like apart from my body and my legs just open because it was just too hot. You open the window, but then the heat, the warm air gets into, and the walls are so thin, so it doesn't really help. So one of the reason was not like the beauty that I saw like on this guy's profile, Instagram profile, and the other one was the actually the temperature. And I thought it's just like because I always start my trip in Spain, so I knew Spain very well. I was cycling in France already 3 times, and I saw Italy, and I was like, okay. And like during the day, actually, the temperature was quite good. And what you said about preparation, I never prepare my trips. I'm like super spontaneous about my trips. And trip to Iceland and Faroe Island was the first trip that we needed to prepare somehow because we needed a very good sleeping bag. We bought one for a comfort temperature -5. It was very good idea because only one night we were cold, but just because we did like 120 kilometers, we were exhausted. We were so exhausted that we didn't even do a dinner, so we didn't eat anything before going to sleep. And we were also a little bit higher, so that was the only night that I was cold. But like otherwise, the sleeping bag was so warm that sometimes even like night was the only moment that I was warm. Moreover, in Iceland, on every campsite, you have like a common zone with kitchen that it's warm. So you go there, you stay with other people that are also traveling. No, because there are a lot of people traveling by camper vans and also quite a lot of cyclists, surprisingly. So you were like warm there, and then you were just going to the sleeping bag directly. So it wasn't like you were outside just in the cold and then going cold to your sleeping bag. So it wasn't actually temperature wise for me, it was good. It was pleasant temperature to cycle because it was like 20 degrees. The wind was a struggle and the rain was a struggle.
Oh, the wind and the rain, cold wind and rain. What provided the most wild in weather? Was it Iceland or the Faroe Islands?
Faroe for wind, but Ireland this year for rain.
Can I ask when you were in Ireland?
July.
Friends of mine and guests of the podcast, Stevie and Tom Tisson, they did a 2 month sabbatical leaving their place in Germany in July, and they spent time in the UK, Wales, Ireland, and they had constant rain for their trip. And I'm wondering whether you were there around a similar time frame or not. I think you might have been a little bit earlier, but I can say Tom's anecdote was he'd love to go back to Ireland in the summer to see what a summer's like there. And of course, the joke is that he was there in summer.
No, right? But everyone was saying like June was amazing and then August was amazing. It was just July, but it rained.
Oh, I don't know that August was amazing because Stevie and Tom were definitely there in August. It was wet.
The second part was already better weather, and then September I think was also quite warm. But when we were there, like I remember one day in Faroe Island, it was our last cycling day there, and we could go on a main road with many cars, or like there was like panoramic road. Yeah, so basically we decided for the panoramic road because once we went on the main road instead of panoramic, we tried on the panoramic, but it was so foggy that I couldn't see Gosha that was like a meter in front of me. So we were just like it's too dangerous for us to go, and the cars were going quite quickly, and it was wind and rain. So this time we decided to go again on the panoramic road. So it was again rainy, windy, and foggy. I couldn't see anything. And then right in the middle, my wheel disinflated. I didn't have a puncture because I just pumped it, but like in the middle of nowhere, like with the car just passing by quite quickly, couldn't see anything. Gosha was just standing on the road and just waving to the car so they could see us because there was like no part where we could just stay safely. So we fixed it. And I remember that day rained so much that I still remember this horrible feeling when water was going down my legs and right into the shoe.
Oh, yeah, I know this feeling. I know this feeling. It's horrible. So you're describing this time that I always think of when I get soaking wet. And it's this weird phenomena where it's raining and you're wet, but then all of a sudden it's like the threshold has been broken and your feet are all of a sudden like in swimming pools of water.
Yes.
Is that the
Yes.
same feeling you're thinking of there?
When we got to the gas station for a coffee and for something warm, I just like went to the bathroom, took a paper toilet, and I just put it into my shoes so it's like takes it. And I thought that was like the worst cycling day in my life. And never had so much rain up to the moment when I went this year to Ireland, and that was a daily routine. Every day it was raining. There was a day when we were in the Northern Ireland, going through some mountains, and it was raining for 48 hours. 48 hours. There was a moment that there were no, like, I was looking for a cafe just to stop and to get a little bit dry. There were no cafes, no restaurants, no supermarkets where we could stop and have something warm or even to be in a warm place. So then I said, okay, at least maybe I can find some bus stop. There were no bus stops. We needed to make extra 15 kilometers to get to the gas station. just to be in some warm place. Luckily, they had like a hot coffee there and tea, so we just like standing, but they didn't have a place to sit, so just like standing there and shaking. And then when we got to the campsite, I remember it was called meadow camping, and it was in the meadow. And actually, lady, when we arrived, she knew that we will come, so she like made an extra shelter for us where we could just put our bikes. And she found a spot for us because it was a meadow, so it was already a little bit flooded.
Oh, great.
Little bit part that was up. So she said, okay, you can pitch your tent here because it's like dry. And then our clothes were so wet and we wanted to make some laundry, but she didn't have a dryer. So she just took all our laundry and she dried it in her house and then she brought it to us. And I still remember that in this tiny kitchen that she had, and like many people wanted to be there, and we were just like with our hair dryer, because the best thing you can take to Iceland, Faroe Island, and Ireland is your hair dryer. Not to dry your hair, but to dry your
Your
shoes.
clothes and your shoes.
So basically, it was like 2 hours every day that we needed to stand there and just to dry all the 3 pairs of shoes because they were so soaked. Otherwise, it was impossible just to cycle the next day. And once it happened to us that we were wild camping in a pure rain, it was Saturday, all the campsites were fully booked, and we just wild camped in a park, in a public park. And the next day, I remember the feeling of putting your feet into those wet shoes. It was just horrible. It was horrible. And then still cycling in a rain.
Oh, wow. Do you ever consider, Agnieszka, going back to a place you've already been to on a bike to see what it's like? Or do you prefer not to go at all? Because I wonder, having had such a wet experience in Ireland, and you recall stories there with the people of being beautiful and so friendly and welcoming, do you ever wish to go there for a few weeks and see blue sky and sunshine? Do you ever think about doing that? Or are you the sort of person that goes somewhere once and I've been there and so I'll have a new experience somewhere else?
In a month, I go to Ireland, but not with my not with my bike.
But not with your bike. I was going to say you're choosing an interesting month to go.
Yeah. I would love to with Faroe Island. We didn't, so like two places that I for sure want to go back. It's Faroe Island and Ireland. I would love to do in Ireland the whole Wild Atlantic way,
Yeah.
like the whole thing, because we were skipping quite a lot. It was impossible in 3 weeks and a half to just to cycle it all. And the Faroe Island. So when we landed in Iceland, our first plan was to go around Iceland and then fly back to Poland. But then when we got there, we met some people and they were like, "Oh yeah, but we are taking a ferry to Faroe Island," and we're like, "Ah, interesting." So we like Googled, and luckily, because they said, "Yeah, but we booked our tickets like 2 months ago," and luckily there were still some tickets available, because on a ferry to Faroe Island, it's mandatory to have a cabin, so you cannot have like only seat. You need to have a cabin. So there are limited places because of that. And so we booked the tickets like in 3 weeks and a half. So we had like 3 weeks and a half to be in Iceland. And then we had our ferry to Faroe Island. And then we wanted to stay 3 days in Faroe Island because I was like, yeah, there are small islands. 3 days is more than enough just to cycle all thing. But there were no tickets for the ferry in 3 days. So we needed to stay a week, and we were like, oh no, because Faroe are extremely expensive. It's such expensive country, like really, like Iceland is expensive, but Faroe Islands is even more expensive.
So much more remote, I guess, in a way, isn't it? Like I imagine there's more transportation that goes to Iceland than would go to the Faroes. Is there even an airport at the Faroe Island?
Yes, there is.
Yeah, but still, I imagine more flights go to Reykjavik.
You can fly from Copenhagen for sure, and I don't remember from where else, but I think like from Copenhagen for sure. But yeah, very often flights are cancelled because of the wind. Actually, we cycled close to the airport. And now I think that 1 week wasn't enough to see Faroe Island.
So you've gone from thinking 3 days was going to be enough to, oh no, how are we going to fill a week, to being there for a week and going, I need to go back for longer. How much time do you think you could, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but just from what you've shared, Agnieszka, it sounds like you had like some pretty intense wind and rain, but you would still go back to explore for longer. How long would you go for, ideally?
If I could, I think like 3 weeks would be enough.
3 weeks. And what makes you want to go back? What is it that would make you want to go back to an area where you had such miserable weather. What is it that's cooling you there?
The views.
Yeah.
I've never seen such a green color in my life. The green was just amazing. And all the cliffs and fjords and secluded beaches and the campsites, because everywhere there is a coastline. So all the campsites were just basically with the sea view. And campings are quite cheap. Like campings are like okay price, like around 15 euros a person, or
That's not bad.
sometimes 20, like for two, so it was okay. And they, again, very often they have like very nice common zone where you can just stay and just get warm. And like we met so many nice people and other travelers. And I think Iceland was more original in a sense that the things that you could see there were things that you cannot see anywhere in Europe, like volcanoes or like hot springs and oh, now I forgot the word, like grieta, the geysers as well. But there's also like this place that two tectonic plates, so like European and Northern American, you can see
The fault line.
yeah, like the
Seismic plates.
like you can see the hole between those two tectonic plates. I was actually cycling there, so you cannot see it anywhere in Europe. But then again, like Faroe Island, it was just like another level. Like all the water, there are waterfalls everywhere, like everywhere, everywhere. And because of the wind, you can just cycle like 50 kilometers a day maximum, because the wind is just too strong to get anywhere. And we have still few islands that we would like to visit. And moreover, we were lucky enough, we arrived at 3 o'clock at night, and there was Olavoska Festival, that is their national holiday in the name of Saint Olaf. So, like, straight away from the ferry, we just went to the city center for the party, and all the people were dressed in their national costumes. Young people, teenagers, elderly people, everyone was singing, drinking, dancing. And because of that, we stayed the next day, because the next day was like the most important day of this holiday. So we were just like there on the celebrations, and everyone was wearing their national costumes. That for me was amazing, because if you need to convince any Polish teenager to wear the national costume, they would never do that. Like for them would be like so shameful. And they were just like everyone was going proudly with their national costume. It was just amazing.
To also be there. Like, did you even know this National Day was going to be on?
No, no, it was total like, because I never planned anything. I just like ended up there. I was like, oh my god, yeah, it was amazing.
What an experience! Because I feel that that's it's like an invitation to of learning that you didn't know you were going to have. This invitation, it's like a gift of culture exchange
Hmm.
that you just happenstance upon, which would have been amazing. Just hearing you speak, that it's the views, that iridescent type of green that you've never seen somewhere before. And then you go to Ireland, which apparently has 50 shades of green. Maybe the Faroe Islands has the 51st shade. It's just another level there. But I've seen a documentary, I believe it's of Lee Craigie and the Adventure Syndicate, and she was cycling on the Faroes and talking about it. I don't know if you've seen it before either. I'm pretty sure I saw it on YouTube. And that's where I first heard about even cycling in the Faroe Islands, because Iceland, and I don't really want to move on from there, Iceland would be an amazing experience because it's just so vastly different. Like you said, you're seeing things in nature that you cannot see anywhere else in Europe. An active volcano, geysers, springs, waterfalls, tectonic plates meeting.
Crack, that's the word. The crack between.
The crack. There you go. The crack in the plates. There we go. I'm glad that came to you now, not at 3 a.m.
Yes.
The Faroe Islands to me seem even more mysterious, I guess.
We met very few cyclists, but there were some. Mostly because they were like on a ferry to Iceland, so they just like.
Did you almost feel like you were defying, not the odds or anything, but did you feel like you were cycling in defiance? You were cycling somewhere that maybe cyclists weren't meant to be, in that even the act of riding a bike in this wind is just insane in some ways?
I like the idea that there were not many cyclists there.
Yeah.
So it was something original. And actually, people enjoy more those, when I talk about those countries that are not so typical for cycling. And the same happened to me. I was surprised because in Ireland, we met quite a lot of, still not so many people, but doing Wild Atlantic Way. But we just bumped into one couple, British couple, doing east coast of Ireland. So like, and it was also very beautiful. And first of all, like Irish people are the nicest people in Europe that I from all my trips, like literally the nicest one. Everyone from the car, they were just like waving to us. Everyone in each village, they were just like, "What are you doing?" Especially that we were like three girls, and they were like so surprised, like cycling in Ireland? Are you crazy? You know, like in this weather. Everyone was just like talking to us, and even drivers were so respectful. Like 90% of the drivers were just waiting to take over. And they were just like, even if we were going like up the hill 5 kilometers an hour, they were waiting for the good moment and for good visibility just to pass by next to us. They wouldn't really do anything to like make us like feel
Unsafe.
yeah. So it was amazing, like everyone. And I always hate when cars they use the horn because in most of the countries like get out of my way, and I'm always getting so angry. So just to change this energy, like bad energy of like using the horn, I started to wave to people and saying like, oh, maybe they just want to say hello to me. So I'm just waving to them, and then I'm like calmer. Maybe they're like laughing at the ha ha ha, you know, like. But in Ireland, actually, people were using their horn because they really wanted to
Say hello.
man, like what's going on? So yeah.
Yeah, like they're cheering you on in a way. And actually, Agnieszka, I have had the privilege of having that experience in Ireland. Now, I lived in Ireland for 18 months before moving to France. We were there actually longer than we wanted because COVID happened and we actually got stuck there. But I have experienced cycling in Ireland, admittedly very limited because of COVID and lockdowns, but that was my experience. And especially coming from Australia, where unfortunately we have a bit of an aggressive culture towards cyclists. We have a car centric culture, really.
Mm-hmm.
But in Ireland, I remember that was my experience. And I remember vividly saying it to my husband on the first sort of ride away from Dublin, North County Dublin, then in the countryside was, oh my gosh, people are sort of waiting to overtake. That's amazing. Like they're just staying behind you.
Yes.
Like they're not angry. And they're not angry when they pass you.
No, at all, at all.
And they're curious about you as well. I remember actually even just off the bike, just going for walks and reminding myself to be really nice because people are going to say hello to you when they pass you in the street. Hi, how are you? And they actually genuinely want to know how you're going. I love the Irish people are beautiful, and I fully agree with you. They're just it's a beautiful, friendly, welcoming culture, isn't it?
Very, I really enjoy it. Yeah, definitely. And that was about the not many cyclists, you know, on the road.
Yeah, you are right though, because when you think of it, when people go to cycle in Ireland, it is the Wild Atlantic Way, and really the majority of that, it's all West Coast oriented, isn't it? Because I mean,
Kerry Ring, I also there's quite famous.
yeah, the Ring of Kerry, Dingle Peninsula, yeah, and Beera Peninsula and Cork and everything like that. That's what you hear about.
Yeah.
I noticed you went to the cliffs of Moher. That is somewhere where I have a shared experience. My husband and I, we wild camped at the top of the cliffs. It was an amazing experience. We woke up to thick fog you couldn't see, and then I went to make coffee, and then all of a sudden we got this magical gift from nature where the fog cleared just for us, and the clouds of fog were rolling over the cliffs like waterfalls. I will never forget that experience in my life. What was it like for you on the cliffs? What sort of experiences did you have? And did you camp at the top of the cliffs as well?
No, so actually the adventure with Cliffs of Moher started a few days before. Not because we were like three, so we had like three times more problems during our trip that we needed to deal with. My friends, Isabella's rack, like the panniers holder, no, the rucksack broke.
Yeah, her rack. Yeah, the
The
rack.
rack broke.
Oh no.
Yes, so we like with those like quick zippers. I think that's the name.
Yeah, zip ties. Yes,
Yeah, zip
absolutely.
ties. Some French people they help us, and we just try to put it somehow so we can just get to Galloway. And me and Gosha, we took like all the heavy stuff, and she was just like carrying her clothes and my backpack that I normally have on the back of my bike. And she was very tired because it was her first trip. She wasn't prepared at all, and her dream was to get to Cliffs of Moher. But because we already have the tickets, the plane tickets, and I had my ferry tickets, so we were like on a short schedule. So going to Galloway was not an option because it was her first trip. She had knee pain, unfortunately, and so we tried to somehow not do so many kilometers, but to get to Cliffs of Moher so she can see them. Like so we can all see them, no? But like for Isabella, like her highlight of the trip was that. So I started like to investigate the map, And I saw, so like to go to Doolin,
Yes, I know Doolin. Yes.
120 kilometers if we're going cycling through Galloway. But then I saw that there are like Aran Islands on the way. So I thought like, oh, maybe we can go to Aran Island by ferry and then from there to Doolin. And I checked everything and there was a ferry from the place where we were and then to Doolin. So I said, okay, amazing. But then I started to read and like on the second ferry, it was said like, oh, the bikes are allowed only if the captain lets them. So I was like, so we won't go to Aran Island the next day, no, because then we needed to go on the next day already, and then in the evening take a ferry, and then the captain says no, and then we still need to go back and still do the 120 kilometers because then we are losing all the time that we had to see Cliffs of Moher. And then so we said like, okay, so we just like go as far as we can to Galloway, then we will try just to take any train, no, but like a bus or something. And then, like 4 kilometers before the place where we're supposed to go to Galloway or to the ferry, we met this German cyclist, and he said, "Oh, I'm just coming back from Aran Island. There was no problem with my bike. You can just take it like on both ferries." And we're like, so we just changed it, like so. Then we camped somewhere. We wild camped somewhere next to the ferry, and then we went to Aran Island. We spent the whole day there. Me and Gosha, we cycled. Isabella rested in a town. She just walked a little bit. And then we took a ferry to Dulin. And it was raining all the time. Like it was, it was so rainy. And we stayed in campsite. And of course, we enjoyed Dulin and the live music and everything. It was amazing. And the next day, we started the trip, started the day in a rain. And we were just like, oh no, it's horrible, it's horrible. And when we got to the cliffs of Moher, they were covered in fog.
Oh, I know that foggy experience. Oh, I could probably share some fog photos with you, but it doesn't sound like you got that magic moment of the sky clearing just momentarily. And
So I have like those pictures, that I found on the internet when I'm talking about this trip, and I'm just like, like on Instagram, there's like expectations and realities.
in reality, yeah,
Putting those two pictures
totally.
together. So there was a moment that the wind came and took it a little bit away. Yeah, so we could see it, but still, it has like this mysterious and a little bit creepy. It was still quite cool.
My memories from it as well, because like I said, notwithstanding when the fog sort of cleared, and it was momentarily for us, and it was a fluke. I must admit, it's because I'm a coffee lover that I think I even got to see this moment, because it was the draw of having coffee in the morning that got me to open the tent fly on what was otherwise a foggy day to go out and get the coffee ready. I was like, oh my gosh, the sun is clear. I'm going to have a look at this. This is amazing. And then that moment passes within a few minutes. We didn't have any lights or anything with us on this trip. And it was so foggy and so thick. We weren't stuck, but we stayed for a few hours before the fog sort of cleared enough for us to be able to ride on the road to actually be in a state where the cars were there that they would see us, because it was just so thick. So I totally can 100% relate with what that fog was like. Thankfully, we didn't have rain, though.
Especially that the streets are so narrow.
Yeah, man.
There's nowhere
to go.
Yeah, and then from there you just need to like roll down, and I remember that it was quite steep. We're going quite fast on that road from the Cliffs of Moher.
One of the things with Ireland is the narrow streets, but the hedgerows. And the great thing about them is, I mean, whilst they could block your view, but there's something beautiful about a narrow country Irish lane. But the hedgerows also block the wind, and I remember being very thankful for that. I imagine on the Faroe Islands that wouldn't have been the case at all.
No trees.
No, exactly.
Same in Iceland, no trees.
Yeah, it's like treeless naturally. It's like a plain, really, isn't it?
Yeah. I met this French cyclist once, and he said, "Oh, I want to go to Iceland," but he was sleeping always in his hammock. And I told him, "But you know that you need to take your tent." And he said, "No, I will take my hammock." And I was like, "No, but there are no trees." He was like, "What? Imagine now that you take your hammock and then you have nowhere to sleep."
What an oversight that would have been. Could you imagine just turning up? Be like, oh, what's my sleep system going to be now?
Yeah, that would be a struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you find Iceland a lot of cyclists there? Because Iceland, I don't want to say that it's fashionable, because that's the wrong word, but it's certainly more discovered now by tourists and of all types. And so maybe it's more accessible. Or did you find a lot of cyclists there while you were there?
Quite a lot of cyclists. I didn't maybe not as many like in France or Spain, but I was surprised with the number of the cyclists, that there are so many of them. There were quite a lot. So most of them, they're like doing their ring road that you can go all around Iceland, many of them were going like for like with the gravel bikes, like to just cross the Iceland in the middle because it's like very wild. There's nothing there. Like you need to carry food for a few days and stuff. So it's also quite adventurous. But yeah, there were quite a lot of them, especially when we got on a ferry to Faroe Island. I think there were like 20 bikes.
Wow.
Yes, I think like 5 or 7 of us get off the ferry in Faroe Island, and like rest of them they continue to Denmark.
Hearing you, Agnieszka, speak so fondly, if we track back to the Faroe Islands, there's going to be people listening to you talk about that who go, wow, there's a destination I want to go to with my bike now. What would be the bit of advice you'd give them if they're going to go to the Faroe Islands? What would you say you need to know about the Faroe Islands before you go there? Notwithstanding the fact that you don't plan, if you wanted to give someone some assistance, what would you tell them?
Take a hairdryer with
Take
you.
the hairdryer. Love it.
Actually, we read that on some blog about Iceland, about traveling in Iceland. That's why we took our hairdryer. Otherwise, we wouldn't have it. This time, we're really prepared. And definitely, minimum, I think it's 10 days, 14 days to be there. Also, traveling in Faroe Island, because there's so many islands, we changed a little bit the strategy. So we weren't changing the campsites every day. We were like going to one island, staying on a campsite, and just discovering the places to see there from the campsite. We were staying there for 2 or 3 nights, no, so like 2 full days, 1 full day or 2 full days, and we're just like discovering places from there, and then going to another campsite and discovering the other island without the panniers. Yeah, definitely be prepared for like just bring some good, really good raincoat and yeah, Gore-Tex shoes. They don't really work there, so like I don't know. Maybe it's even better to just cycle in your Crocs or in flip flops impossible. And yeah, definitely a tent because no trees. And I think also wild camping in Faroe Island must be quite difficult because all lands are owned by someone. So you always need to ask the owner if you want to pitch the tent there. But basically, you're in the middle of nowhere, so you don't know who's the owner of that land. But then the campsites are not so expensive. And I had one more thing to say. Now I forgot. Wait, maybe later. There was one more thing that I wanted to say. And also, what was amazing in Faroe Island, there was one tunnel that you could cycle through, underwater tunnel. So I cycled 105 meters under the water, under the sea level. That was creepy. I was like, just relax, don't think about it. Like, but yeah, it was a really, really cool experience.
105 meters underwater. Wow. How long was this tunnel?
I think it was 4 or 5 kilometers. So it was like 2 kilometers down, more or less, and then just like going slowly up, 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 up. So this one was allowed. There's another one. I'm not sure if now it's the only, but it was the first underwater roundabout in the world, and it was in Faroe Island. So this one you cannot cycle, but you can put your bike on a bus. So we just like because we were on one island and then we were going back to Dorsham, we just like cycle back there.
So my mind is trying to compute a roundabout under the water. Like, obviously, it's in a tunnel. But even the idea that you would have a roundabout there is quite interesting.
Yeah, I know. Very, yeah.
And the population of the Faroe Islands mustn't be that much.
55,000 people. The city where I live in Spain, it's 80,000 people and it's very small. So imagine like the whole country, it's 55.
Okay, I know we spoke really quickly at the start of the show about beautiful Spanish omelettes. What do you eat? What's the national dish in the Faroe Islands? I'm thinking fish.
I think it will be fish. We didn't really go to the restaurant. It was just way too expensive. In the supermarket, it was already quite pricey.
And Iceland would be the same.
From Iceland because it was cheaper to buy some
My
things in
gosh,
Iceland.
that's how you know you're going somewhere expensive, if Iceland's cheaper.
Yeah, Iceland again would be fish, and surprisingly, fish and chips is quite popular. A lot of Icelandic people they emigrated to States, and when they came back, we will have there a lot of burgers and fish and chips and fast foods like pizza and stuff. Their national dish. I think a dry shark meat as well is something that we haven't tried it though. Yeah.
Do you think, Agnieszka, you'd ever go to these countries on your own? You did the trip to Iceland and the Faroes with one person. You went to Ireland, you had two people with you. Would you go there on your own?
I wouldn't be. Yeah, that would be okay. I mean, there are beaches in Iceland that we were like going for 160 kilometers and literally there was nothing. It was a desert. So it was so boring even for two of us. But yeah, I felt totally safe there. And there are so many still quite a lot of tourists coming and people with camper vans. So there was always like it would be perfectly fine to go. Just because my friend, she said like, "Oh, can I go with you this year?" I was like, "Okay, sure." But it wasn't because I was afraid of going there or anything like that.
Are there countries, I guess, conversely, that you wouldn't go to on your own?
Quite a lot of them.
Okay, okay. And what is it? Is there a reason for that?
I mean, I always admire girls solo traveling solo by bike, like in the countries like Saudi Arabia. I'm like following few girls, and they were like alone there. I think even one of them, she was like recently.
Yeah, Helen Dainty and Madeline Hoffman as well has done the same. She's gone through Saudi as well.
I admire them so much. I don't know from where it comes, if it's like my imagination again or everything. I also live right next to Moroccan border, and I just feel very, for me it's very uncomfortable when I go there, even with my friends, and just like everyone is staring at me. So for me it makes me feel so uncomfortable and so unsecure that for me like any of those countries would be impossible to travel on my own. That's why I always like admire those girls, but this is something that if I have a company, yes, but not alone.
I think that's fair though. Like, it's one of those things, you know yourself enough to know that if you're going to be uncomfortable too much, it's fair for you to realize maybe that's not the trip you want to do on your own.
It would be too stressful. And why I should like stress would like inside me. Maybe if I go there, I would be fine. You never know. And again, when I was in Morocco, like I met many amazing people, but like still, like half of those people were just like saying something that I didn't understand, like doing like ksh, ksh, and I'm like ksh, ksh, what? Like I'm not your dog or anything. Like no, it was very uncomfortable. And the other day, I even saw like a girl. She's also traveling in Africa somewhere now, and kids were throwing stones to her when she was passing by the villages. And I was like, and actually, many of the cyclists, because like many cyclists that were going to Morocco, coming back from Morocco, they were staying in my place on warm showers. And they were saying the same. Like kids were throwing stones into them, like when they were going through the villages. Like, how stressful must that be? I don't know, like the children, like
And I guess if you know yourself already, we were talking very candidly about, dealing with your own fears every day, dealing with the fear of wild camping. If you know that that's something that becomes something that you have to deal with each day, you already are aware of it yourself to not have to put yourself in that situation. It would be interesting, Agnieszka, if the opportunity came to, say, tour with one of your friends there and to tour in a country that you may be a bit concerned with. Having the experience of touring there, would you then think differently? And I wonder even if that's something you're considering doing, perhaps.
that would be lovely. No, if I have opportunity, and now I'm even looking into some countries like that, and I'm just like on some Facebook groups, and they're like some. Very often there are people like, "Oh, I'm going this month somewhere. If someone wants to join me or something." Or you never know. Maybe once I will be just cycling, and like I met Muriel.
Yeah, Muriel. Hello, Muriel. Buongiorno.
Bonjour.
Yeah, he's in Korea at the moment. Well, I think he's enjoying himself, just not enjoying the weather. Muriel doesn't like the cold.
A nightmare for you. It's a nightmare.
Yeah, he has rain and cold weather. Sorry, Muriel.
I met him on WhatsApp group for people cycling in Europe. So I met this before Muriel. I met this Austrian cyclist tourer in Montenegro, and we cycled together for a week. And then in Shkoder, I was resting with Kevin, and Muriel texted me. So we waited for him one day, and he joined us too. And we were cycling, three of us in Albania for 1 day and a half. I think we cycled, three of us. And then in Tirana, Kevin went to Northern Macedonia, and I met with Muriel like 30 kilometers away from Tirana again, where we wild camp. But I told him if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't cycle in Albania on my own. I would just take a bus. Because even when I was going with guys and they were just like leaving me maybe like 100 meters or 200 meters before, all the cars were stopping. People were just like opening the windows and they were like, hey, beauty, or something. Like, it's not their culture. So I was feeling already uncomfortable, even though I was going with them. So probably if it wasn't for Muriel, he even changed the route for me because he was going to the mountains just to take me all the way south, to keep me company all the way south to Sarande, I think, where I took a ferry to Corfu Island, where I finished my trip that year.
It's interesting, isn't it, with those experiences, because you would have a vastly different experience to, say, a solo male traveller in that way. And so then your perspective on a country becomes so different to what others do. And I guess also with a solo male traveller, because they don't have that experience, sometimes it can even be a bit more difficult to appreciate
Mhm.
just perhaps even the extra barrier or perceived barrier of being able to travel in this way. Do you think any of your friends that you travelled with in Ireland and on your other tours as well, would they be intrigued enough to join you on a trip in a country that you might be a little bit nervous about?
Maybe I think that with them in some countries I could go with, but not in all of them. I think then it would be like maybe some South American countries. Then yes, but still. But again, I really admire the girls that are doing that on their own, and I wish I had this something in my head that I wouldn't be afraid. Like I'm like, and I'm happy for them, because they can do that, and I'm like, oh damn, I wish. But then when I think me alone there, I'm like, no, this is totally not for me.
Don't judge yourself. You're still doing amazing things, and you're still doing things that a lot of other women I know will perceive as going, wow, you're doing that as well.
No, I don't feel bad about it at all.
It's also, I absolutely admire, they're almost like pioneers to me. They're showing me the way. They're showing that it's possible. And I guess they're making me think about it in a curious way as well, which is sort of the first step to take.
Yeah, yeah.
I think invariably what this show has taught me is that a lot of my preconceptions about places are not necessarily what they will be. It's not saying that things do not happen to people, though. And I know I certainly have had guests where sadly things have happened to them. And I don't want to say that it's all a fear and it's all unfounded, because that isn't necessarily correct either. It's a curious thing to learn more about the world, to learn more about cultures, to learn more about countries. Invariably, what I've learnt the most is the overwhelming majority of beautiful strangers just want to have good things for you. They only wish you well. They don't wish you bad luck. They don't and they don't want to do you harm.
Definitely, definitely. But we always say that bad experiences and bad things, they weigh more than the good things. And probably, as you said, maybe if I'm already there and I see it's okay, I would be okay to cycle alone. But I think now, like, I don't know, my prejudices about those places are so strong that up to the moment when I'm not there, I think it will be like, oh, I'm not really sure. Maybe if I go there once with someone, like for 2 weeks, and I see it's okay,
Yeah.
then I will just continue somewhere alone.
Yeah.
You never know. Maybe it will change someday. But at this moment,
It's how it is.
in Europe, it's cool.
Can I ask you a different question then, Agnieszka? And that is, because you've had the benefit of touring on your own and also touring with friends, which do you prefer?
I was expecting that question.
Well, that is sort of a bit of like the question at the end, and I'm still going to ask you that anyway. But overwhelmingly, like a long distance tour of anything, whether it's 3 weeks, whether it's 3 months, would you prefer to be doing it on your own, or would you prefer to be with friends?
I think I like to combine now. I really enjoy the company. It's just so easy you can share the cost of the laundry. Very often it's way cheaper if you camp together somewhere and to pay, like on the campsite. Someone is just going to the supermarket and the other one is staying with all the things. You're pitching the tent, someone is cooking. You're preparing breakfast, someone is like putting the tent back, and you have company just to talk with someone, etc. But being with someone 24 hours a day, it's so complicated. So
It really is.
I'm like friends, and I'm also very careful with who I'm going with, because two of my friends, they're very easygoing, so it was easy with them to be. But after a month, I was also a little bit tired of the company, so I felt that I want to be alone. But then after 2 months of being alone, I was like, oh, I wish I could meet someone, on the road and just join them for a week or so. I remember that before I met Kevin and Muriel, like the last 2 weeks of my trip, the big trip I did in company. But I was in Croatia, and actually I was talking with my ex-boyfriend, and I was like, oh, I'm just so tired of being alone. I don't want to be alone anymore. I think I would just finish my trip before. I was really, really exhausted. And then I just bumped into someone. So it was like, and then I was like, oh no, I can just like travel the world. I'm not going back. So I like this like being alone, but then to have a company. So both definitely have their like pros and cons. So it would be very difficult for me to choose one. At the beginning, I thought I love traveling alone, up to the moment when I traveled with someone, and I saw it just like very comfortable and cool as well. But then I also saw that I was tired after a few weeks, and I just wanted to be alone again. So like combination of both it's just perfect. It would be very difficult for me to choose one.
It's interesting because it was actually only through interviewing people on this show that I learnt about things. You spoke there about, the WhatsApp groups, and there are WhatsApp
Hmm.
groups if you're cycle touring that you can get into, and you can find that there are people that will be riding where you're going to be riding, and maybe they want company. It was a previous guest of the show, Ed Hawes. He rode from London all the way to New Zealand, and something he told me was he spent a lot of that time, that's like 25,000 kilometres, FYI. That's a long tour, which he only took a year to do. Shout out to you, Ed. You're a legend. But Ed ended up cycling quite a lot of that with people as well for periods of time, and he with groups of people with periods of time.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's the thing. You were talking there about groups where people are saying, hey, I want to go here. Does anyone want to join me?
Hmm.
Do you look at that now? Because the question I have for you, Agnieszka, is clearly traveling in this way is something that you're captivated by. You speak so passionately about your experiences there. I feel it's within you now to travel and be adventurous in this way. What are your ideas for future trips, and what sort of tours do you think you'll be taking?
Mm, so part of this trip I promised not to say, so I'm not going to say where we're going.
That's fine.
But it's going to a very, very cool place. But then I think when I will be back in Europe the next summer, I would love to cross the Arctic Circle and go to the North Cap.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Because basically, when we started our trip with Gosia, I saw, I think somewhere on Instagram, the idea of bikingas, no? So like written in a wrong way, no? With B. So it's like from English word for bike and bikinga in Spanish. So we called our adventures in the north Operación Bikingas. So that would be like continuation of that. So, like to just discover those Nordic countries. So that would be probably next year, if possible. We would like to go there, or because Gosha and Isa they were a little bit tired of the rain and cold. So I also propose to go to Balkans, but like to Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, and maybe North Macedonia that I haven't visited yet by bike. I was there only with backpacking, and I really enjoyed them. So I think that can also be a nice idea to go there. So we will see next summer where we will go. If in North again, like as a part of this Operación Bikingas thing, or to Balkans.
Yeah, wow. Oh, I just love hearing about these future plans,
But
and
maybe you don't know.
that's
Maybe
something.
something else will pop out, and I will be just like,
Maybe I'll find out you're joining someone and you're going to Morocco,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Saudi or something, totally different. Totally, totally
yeah.
different. That would be amazing. Traveling in this way also, Agnieszka, it can't not change you and your personality a bit. I feel traveling in this way, you are exposed to experiences which shape who you become. If you were to reflect back on how you were when you started on this trip to how you are now, would you reflect on the sort of things that you have noticed have changed more in you at all? Or even things that have solidified and, I guess, boldly, really firmly cemented in you who you are?
Because when I was young, I was very shy, surprisingly, and yeah, I was scared of many many things. So it already like the process of changing started like way before I started to travel. But definitely the way how I travel and then the fact that I'm traveling alone strengthened those qualities, like me being super independent and very sure of my decisions, but not only decisions, but also the fact that whatever I plan, it's okay that the plans changes. Not because some people can be stressed. Oh, I planned this. Oh, it didn't work out, but then you probably something else better will happen. So this is something amazing that I also learned, that actually the less you plan, the better. Because then also you don't overstress that something didn't work out. But even if it's okay. And also that I'm so independent and like I can deal with so many different situations and sometimes stressful situations and dangerous situations that I didn't have so many of them. I was also very lucky. And it will be always okay, like you don't really, that I can deal with them if something happens. So I think for me, it's very important. And yeah, sometimes people are like, how you can just travel like from one country to another? And I'm like, I don't know, now it's just normal, no? At the beginning for me, it was like, oh, that's a big adventure. And when someone's like, "Oh my god, this is a big adventure," and for me it's like, yeah, but I already met so many people that doing that that for me is just like normal day.
It's become normal.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's also very cool.
It's amazing, actually. Like, even just reflecting back on how we started, talking about the nerves of setting out from Pamplona, not sure whether you're going to go east or up over the mountains, to where you are now. That self assuredness that comes through experience, like you said, the ability to say, I can solve problems. I'm not going to be scared of what might happen from that perspective.
Planning things and being spontaneous, like this year trip was insane. I supposed to be back in Poland for my birthday, that it's beginning of September, and I returned like mid October. So the plan was to go to the northern Germany, and then I knew that I wanted to go to Stuttgart because my friend lives there. And in Stuttgart, I wanted to go to Lindau, but it was like spontaneous, like, oh, let's go to Lindau because another friend of mine lives there. But then I really enjoyed Rhine River. So I said, oh, I can go to Lindau in 3 days, so I can just go back to Rhine River and go all the way around and visit Switzerland as well. And so I did that. And it took me like 2 weeks instead of 3 days to get there. And then when I was in Lindau, I was like, oh, Liechtenstein, it's next to me. So I've never been to Liechtenstein, and probably I would never be so close to Liechtenstein. So I just cycled to Liechtenstein. And in Liechtenstein, my warm showers, they told me, oh, you should go to Innsbruck and cross the Albert Pass. So I just went to Innsbruck. And in Innsbruck, they told me, oh, you're so close to Dolomites and to Italy. You should go to Italy. So I just went to Italy. In Italy, I followed the Drava River, and it was crossing through Slovenia. So I ended up in Slovenia and having burek, that I love burek. It's like their typical pastry in Balkans.
Yum.
And it was in Slovenia. It was already so close to Graz in Austria. And Kevin, that I mentioned before that I met, he lives there. So I just, and I told him, maybe you can come to Vienna to see me. But then I was like, even more south, and I was like, oh, I can just come and see you there. So I just visited him, and I stayed there for a couple of days and rested. And just because it was already getting quite cold, and I also wanted to get before 15th of October, because there were elections in Poland. So I just like decided from there, like I was like, no more. I'm not taking any more advices from people what to see. I'm just going straight to Poland. But still on the way, I was like going to some places, but like not away from the route anymore. But yeah, this trip was just like insane, and I was just like going with the flow, and I really enjoy it, and like I didn't regret any of those decisions and places that I have seen, that I took it. So it was really cool. It was quite fun.
That spontaneity and curiosity that informs the way that you go each day. I love that. And I can feel it in the energy that you speak about that trip. And, I know listeners, you can't see this. I can see the beaming smile on Agnieszka's face as she's retelling the story. It's making me smile. It's just beautiful. So I feel like you said, you set out with your friends for 3.5 weeks in rainy, wet Ireland, and then all of a sudden they're flying back to Poland and you're having this massive adventure, almost going the long way back to Poland.
Looks like when you see on the map, it looks like I just like took a loop around Germany. But I cycled quite a lot in Germany, so I could practice my German. So it was very good.
And actually, listeners, when Agnieszka says that she can practice her German, I take my hat off to you, Agnieszka. You are so multilingual, and the idea that you speak so many languages and you enjoy being able to learn and get better with each one. And I guess what a great thing to have in your back pocket when you're traveling in this way, the ability to communicate with people in different languages as well.
Now I'm studying Irish.
Oh, brilliant. My father-in-law was studying Irish, actually. He is Irish.
On Duolingo.
Yeah, he was doing something similar. Because when you are on the west coast of Ireland, especially around Connemara and places, and I think maybe Kerry, like the signs are in Gaelic, like they are in Irish, and Irish is not phonetic.
No.
The alphabet's the same, but the pronunciation is vastly different, and you can't tell.
Is it this word? It doesn't really look like what I hear, It's like so like a little bit like French.
Yeah. I love that you're learning a language like that. That is awesome. And here I am struggling with my French.
Every time when I'm in a country, I like just switch. If there is Duolingo on Duolingo, the language that of the country that I am in, like when I'm in France, I studying French. When I was in Holland, I was studying Dutch, just to have few words. It's always good for then people look at you differently if you can just say at least like hi, thank you, or like they're just like, oh, some words. Like they're like how they treat you changes like dramatically. Like they're nice, but they're even nicer when you do that.
They are. You make the effort and then they appreciate that you've made the effort. I think you broaden your experiences up that way as well in how they receive you and in what they might offer up because of that too, which is great. You start off with that sort of thing. I think it was we spoke about Helen Dainty already once this episode, but I remember Helen was sort of saying that she learns like an idiom in the language. So she may not know some of the basics, but she'll be able to respond some way that only people in that country would think to respond. And then the way that they respond to her because of that is quite cool. And I thought that was a great sort of language learning tip.
Once in Spain, I met a Dutch guy and he started to sing to me our national Polish anthem. I was like, that's very bizarre. I know, right?
Wow, yeah. Oh gosh, we are really a world full of people who've travelled and making different connections. I do love that. I love the way that we can do that now. We are in the most amazing time in modern era where we have the ability to do things like switch Duolingo to a different language and learn things, to learn an idiom, to learn just even the basics.
You need just to make an effort. Like there's so many YouTube channels you can just like, but you need to be very determined. It's learning a language on your own. I hate it. I really prefer just to go to class and have a tutor and like someone to motivate me as well. But basically, then at home I'm also studying. But I really enjoy going to classes and just have someone who can explain to you because sometimes it's on your own. It might be difficult.
Yeah, you have to know your own motivations and the way that your learning style is there as well.
But it's easier when you travel later, as you said. Like it can really help you out on the road.
Massively. I know I need to wrap this up soon, and you're someone, Agnieszka, that I feel like I could just speak to for days and time will just pass and it wouldn't matter. I appreciate this is your time and I'm not going to take that away from you. We've spoken already about your experience and your tips, advise someone to bring a hairdryer to Iceland, which I thought was great. But someone that I interviewed recently, Martin and Katja, who cycled the Americas, which is amazing. Martin had done an amazing trip before that, 30 odd thousand kilometers, like monumental. He said something in that episode. He has 2 extra panniers of experience that he brings to a trip because he's had such a big trip. You have so much experience you bring to a trip because you've done a big trip. Collectively, then, a beginner listening wants to go on any sort of trip, whether it's an overnight or a long weekend like you did from the German border to the Russian border, or maybe Ireland in the rain. Equipment aside, what would you tell someone about traveling in this way?
Oh, not to expect anything because you don't know what to expect, I think. Each day can be so different. Everything depends on the road that you decide to take. No, you can go on a busy road with the car, so you can just take this panoramic route and just experience beautiful landscapes. You know, you never know who you will bump into. I met so many people just like cycling around, just going on a day trip, like they were just like, oh, I will take you to these beautiful places. And they were just like taking me to the nice places because they just wanted to chat with me. And probably I would never go to those places if it wasn't for them. So I think that the only thing you can expect is that you cannot expect anything because, I mean, in my case, because I'm very spontaneous, no? Because maybe there is someone who's like, oh, no, I'm not going anywhere because I need to be like at 6 o'clock in hotel because I already paid for it like 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Those people, and so it's also perfectly fine. So for sure, you will have a great adventure and just meet many beautiful people that thinks the same way that you do. That for me was also very important because in my where I live in Spain or in Poland, like nobody do the same thing that I do. So, and this is how I got know about warm showers. Someone told me about warm showers, and I said, okay, I would join the community. I will start having people, cyclists in my home, also to give me strength and motivation. They're saying that if you want to do something, you should study it, or you should surround yourself with people that do the same. No, so this is what was my strategic. In 2019, I joined the warm showers, and before pandemic, I had 2 cyclists from States and 1 cyclist from South Africa. And actually, with Carl, it's a funny story because he came to my place for one night, and he stayed for 3 years and a half in Melilla.
Oh wow. He loved the place that much. He just stayed.
I was quite happy because lucky because then the pandemic started and then there was a Brexit because he had also a British passport. So there were like few things that happened to him.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically he came for one night and he stayed for 3 years and a half. No, but this way I started just to surround myself with those people. And then when I started to travel, I was meeting even more people because I was staying so often with warm showers. and with families. And for me, like staying with the families that they have kids and they're traveling with the kids, for me it's just like amazing. Because when I'm saying like the first thing when I'm going to have kids, it will be like buying a stroller and just like traveling with them, and everyone's like, are you crazy? Like you're not going to take a kid on that trip. And I'm like, yes I will, because I know so many people that do that. It's so normal, you know. And then like when I'm just staying with someone like, oh, I just traveled through both Americas, I'm like, what? How did you do that? Oh, I just wanted to cycle Alaska, and then I was like, oh, I can just go all the way down south. And I was like,
Yeah, it becomes normal, doesn't it? But you're right. You surround yourself with that, then all of a sudden it becomes achievable for you too.
exactly.
It's like language learning. If you listen to the radio in the language you want to hear, and you watch TV, and you surround yourself with people, all of a sudden it sinks in.
You just need to dive into it.
Surround yourself with people who've cycled around the world, and all of a sudden you too can see that it's possible for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's fantastic. And, you know, if it's anything I've learnt doing this show, Agnieszka, it's that people who travel in this way, the community is amazing. People want to share their experiences and help people get within the community too, which is awesome. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I definitely need to wrap this up.
Yeah.
Each episode, I feel, gets longer and longer. I have a few quick questions for you, Agnieszka, which I ask every single one of my guests now to end the show. The first one is, and I actually think this is a tricky one. I do give my guests now a bit of pre-warning that this one's coming, so maybe you've had time to reflect and think about it. But if you had to pick a song that would be the soundtrack, it would be the song that you would put to be the theme to you touring on a bike. What song are you going to pick to be your soundtrack?
I mean, it's not the song that would be like for my trips, but there's one song that I always play when I'm starting to climb the hill. It's Highway to Hell.
Highway to Hell. Oh, I've had this song brought up before.
But it's not describing like how it is. But there is one Spanish song that I really like. Also, now I really like to play it. It also like boosts my energy. It's Madre Tierra, and it says like disfruta las cosas buenas que tiene la vida. So enjoy the good things that the life has. So that could also be Madre Tierra.
The reason I ask this question is not only does it provide an insight into my guests, but I am creating a Seek Travel Ride playlist with a song from each of my guests. And it's such an awesome playlist so far, and it's an eclectic mix.
Oh, please share this playlist with me.
It's coming. So Highway to Hell is already on here, see? So you have to have this Spanish song for you, and I love it. Okay. The next two questions then, Agnieszka. You probably know what they are. One day you were told that you have a choice. You can choose to cycle all day, forever up a hill climb. Or, conversely, you can choose to battle all day into a constant headwind. Which of those two would you like to do the most? Which one are you going to choose?
Climb.
The climb.
I hate wind. Like, headwind is the worst thing that can happen. I remember the worst day in Iceland was for the first 5 or 6 days we had like a backwind. It was just amazing. And then after the rest day, like first 20 kilometers were fine, but then we just like took a turn and we like before we were hidden before the mountain, and like straight away the headwind. Literally we were going like 5 kilometers and a half an hour, and we supposed to cover that day 120. And of course after 50 we just were like, no more. We took a bus. Luckily, there was a bus because in Iceland there are like buses every 2 or 3 days. So that day there was a bus, and we just took a bus to the campsite that we had.
I mean, it needed to, because at 5 kilometers an hour, it's going to take a long time to make 120 kilometers.
Even though that there are like white nights, so you can like really cycle for a long time. It wouldn't be an issue, but no, we were just like we were exhausted.
Hill climb is winning every day of the week. I must admit, most people will say hill climb. I don't know whether I need to reword my question to try and coax some people into the headwind, but I feel like the people I interview have experienced both extremes enough. They're pretty certain of their answers. Final question, and we've sort of almost touched on this already in the show, but this is slightly different. You are given a choice. You're going to be cycling only just for 4 hours on this day, and you can choose to cycle that 4 hours on your own or 4 hours in the company of other people. Which one would you choose?
Depends on the day.
Oh, no. I'm going to have to push you off the fence. Come on now. You have to choose.
I think I still prefer a company. Yeah.
The company of others. I had an inkling that would be what you would say, just because it sounds like you've had some amazing experiences with people on your trips. And so I feel like if it's 4 hours, maybe the 4 hours you want to spend with people.
But I'm very social people at the end. So even though that, for example, when I'm spending all day cycling on my own, I always like at the end of the day to stay with warm showers just to have a company and have a conversation with someone. Or if I'm on a campsite, also to have some interactions with the people there, or in a hostel, you know. So like in the end of the day, I also like to be with someone. I like my alone moment, but I also really enjoy being with people. But being alone all the time, it's also very tiring. So overthinking. So no, definitely company. I like company.
Well, you know what, Agnieszka, I know I propose this to a lot of my guests, but one day, if you'd like 4 hours of company or maybe some extra time and you'd like to come to the Pyrenees, definitely seek me out. I would love to spend some more time with you, ride bikes with you, and learn more about your experience. That would be brilliant. You can come via Pamplona again if you like.
Especially that I still have pending País Vasco, to visit País Vasco.
Oh, the Basque Country has my heart, I must admit. It is some of the most beautiful scenery I have cycled in.
And now my friend, she's there, Anouk. I also cycled with her when I went from Spain to Greece. She cycled with me for the first month till
Oh,
Toulouse.
brilliant.
Yes, and she just moved there. She was traveling around the world for 2 years, and
Oh wow! I need to happenstance. I need to make this connection. What a great world we live in, where someone from Poland can tell someone from Australia about someone else who's living in Pays Basque, and then we can have this connection. It's brilliant.
and she's from Belgium.
Oh, there we go. Oh yeah, no, this has to happen. This has to happen. I keep joking about an in real life meetup. Trying to create maybe a cycling festival. Everyone comes together and I get to have an experience of how I would love to the ideal setting for this podcast, which is a live show at a campfire, Bella's campfire chats, and I just get to hear all the stories. Agnieszka, one day that may happen. I certainly hope that one day you and I get to ride bikes together. I think we would have a hilarious time. We'd have some great conversation and we could both yell at the headwind and just enjoy gleefully the views of a hill climb as well.
Yay!
Thank you so much for sharing your story and experiences with Seek Travel Ride. It has been an absolute pleasure.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you.
I feel so energized having just spoken with Agnieszka there and have her share her experiences. I loved hearing about the spontaneity in which she chooses to travel with her tours and just hearing her describe how the end of that last trip went. Traveling from Ireland on her own then all the way to Poland the long way round. I absolutely loved that. And what about that hot tip? Going to Iceland, make sure to take a hairdryer with you. It was something I would never have conceived to have thought of myself. To you, my listeners, thank you as well. You continue to help me grow the community here and the show. Each week, the amount of people listening to this show grows even more. Each week, I'm getting emails and messages from all of you telling me how much you've enjoyed listening to the stories of my guests and also telling me about your own trips, whether listening to the podcast is inspiring you to take one, or conversely, whether you, like other guests of mine, have been listening to the show while you're taking that adventure yourself. I absolutely love hearing from you. And if you want to get in touch, you can either do that via my email, podcast@seektravelride.com, or if you look in the show notes, you'll actually also see a link where you can leave me a voice message. So if you've got a question about a guest, want to just get in touch and tell me what you think of the show, you can actually follow that link, hit play, and just record a little voice memo that comes directly to me as well. The other thing you can do, if you would like, is join our Facebook community where we share more details about our guests and more photos. And I'm also doing a little bit of a where are they now, because a lot of the guests that I've spoken to are actually partway through a big trip. And so months down the line, it's been interesting for me to look at a world map, keep an eye on my guests and see how far they have gone. Again, that link to the Facebook community is in the show notes. Just tap on that and you can join a wider Seek Travel Ride community there as well. Until the next episode, I'm Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.